Ever walk past a Carl's Jr. and then like do a double take when you see a Hardee's down the street?
It's like that feeling when you realize Spider-Man and Peter Parker are the same person, but for fast food.
Exactly. You think you've got them figured out, same star logo, both serving up those charbroiled burgers.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, they're actually owned by the same company.
And that's where the real head-scratcher begins.
Yeah.
Because despite being under the same corporate umbrella, they've somehow maintained these totally distinct identities. It's like a fascinating case study in brand strategy.
Okay, so before we unravel the how, let's rewind to the where it all began.
So picture this 1940s Los Angeles, a hot dog cart, and a guy named Carl Karcher with a dream. That humble cart was the very first seed of what would become Carl's Jr., a West Coast institution.
Talk about a classic American dream story. But Carl wasn't the only one with a burger vision, right?
Absolutely not. Fast forward to 1960, we're in North Carolina, and Wilbur Hardee opens the doors to his first restaurant. And while they shared that entrepreneurial spirit, Hardee's took root with a distinctly Southern flavor.
Which makes sense considering their modern-day strongholds. You've got Carl's Jr. dominating those West Coast cravings, while Hardee's reigns supreme in the Southeast and Midwest.
It's like they divided the nation based on burger preference.
Except for those wildcard states, right?
Oh, absolutely. Oklahoma and Wyoming said, why choose sides? And went all in with both chains. What's fascinating is that they're the only RNY states where you can find both brands coexisting. I mean, what does that tell you about these two chains?
That's what we're here to unpack. But it begs the question, how did these two separate empires end up under the same roof?
Buckle up, because it's a bit of a corporate roller coaster. In 1997, CKE Restaurants, the company behind Carl's Jr., saw an opportunity. They decided to acquire Hardee's for a whopping, and I mean whopping, $300 million.
Wow. You'd think for that kind of investment, they'd streamline things, merge the brands, But instead, they doubled down on what set them apart.
Precisely. And that decision takes us to the heart of this deep dive, exploring how Carl's Jr. and Hardee's, while connected at the corporate hip, have managed to cultivate such distinct identities.
And nowhere is that difference more apparent than when you step up to the counter and take a look at those menus.
It's true. You'd think a shared ownership would mean like shared menu items, but that's where things get really interesting. Because instead of homogenizing, they leaned into their regional strengths. Take Hardee's, for example. In the early 2000s, they were facing some serious competition in the fast food arena.
Makes sense. The burger scene was getting pretty crowded.
Exactly. So they did something kind of genius. They went all in on their Southern roots.
We're talking biscuits and gravy, sweet tea, the whole 9 yards.
Precisely. They revamped their breakfast menu to feature like a dizzying array of biscuit sandwiches. And let's not forget the piece de resistance, their Nashville hot chicken.
Oh, yeah, now that you mention it, I have seen that advertised everywhere.
Yep.
It's like they single-handedly brought Nashville hot chicken to the masses.
And it worked. It tapped into this sense of regional pride and comfort food nostalgia that really resonated with their like core customer base. Meanwhile, Carl's Jr. was busy crafting a different kind of culinary story, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. They went for a distinctly West Coast vibe. Think bold flavors, a bit more adventurous, even a little edgy.
It's like they looked at the California food scene and said, hold my avocado and sprouts.
And they weren't afraid to experiment either. The guacamole bacon Angus burger, for example, or the jalapeno Angus for those who like a little heat.
And you can't forget about their foray into plant-based options with the Beyond Meat burger, a pretty bold move for a chain known for its charbroiled classics.
It really highlights that difference in target audience, doesn't it? Hardee's is all about familiar comforts, while Carl's Jr. is catering to those seeking something a bit more, shall we say, Californian.
It's fascinating. But here's the thing. Even with these regional distinctions, both chains still offer those core menu items that made them famous in the first place. Your classic charbroiled burgers, chicken tenders, fries, those are universal constants.
So no matter which side of the Mississippi you find yourself on, you're guaranteed a satisfyingly familiar fast food experience.
Exactly. It's like they found a way to be two things at once regional favorites with a shared foundation of burger and fries goodness.
It's a delicate balance, that's for sure. But let's be honest, no fast food meal is complete without those all-important supporting players, the sides and the sweets. You're speaking my language. So while we could dedicate an entire episode to the merits of curly fries versus waffle fries, let's focus on what sets these chains apart in the side dish department.
And it's a classic case of go big or go home for Carl's Jr. They've got Waffle fries, fried zucchini, onion rings.
Yeah.
You name it, they've probably got a deep fryer dedicated to it.
Like they looked at the menu and said, what else can we deep fry?
And why not? It's all about giving those West Coast customers what they want. Variety, indulgence, a side of ranch for dipping, of course.
Whereas Hardee's, they keep it classic with their sides, right? Sticking with what they know best.
Exactly. They've got their apple turnovers, those iconic biscuits drizzled with gravy. It's all about those home-style flavors that pair perfectly with their Southern-inspired menu.
Interesting, right? Even their sides tell a story about their brand identities. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something that's just as important as the food itself they're advertising. Because let's be real, both Carl's Jr. and Hardee's have made some, shall we say, interesting choices over the years.
That they have. They've definitely had their share of marketing moments that sparked conversations, to put it mildly.
Especially in the early 2000s, both brands seemed to rely heavily on, well, let's just say, they weren't exactly known for their subtlety.
Right. There was a period where their advertising leaned heavily on, shall we say, a particular image.
And it wasn't exactly empowering, was it?
It wasn't. But to their credit, they both seem to recognize the need for a change. And what's fascinating is how they diverged in their approaches.
Because in 2018, Hardee's went full-on Americana with their Taste Like America campaign.
Exactly. They swapped those, let's say, attention-grabbing visuals for heartwarming images of families, farmers, small-town life, you name it.
And who could forget that big, wet jingle? They really committed to that down-home vibe.
It was a complete 180 from their previous campaigns. And to be fair, it seemed to resonate with a lot of people. It felt authentic, nostalgic, a celebration of these heartland values.
Meanwhile, Carl's Jr. doubled down on their edgy West Coast persona.
Oh, absolutely. They brought in Matthew McConaughey as their spokesperson. And let's be honest, nobody rocks a charbroiled burger quite like McConaughey.
It was brilliant. His voice, that cool, confident delivery, it just screamed Carl's Jr.
They weren't afraid to be bold, to push boundaries, and it definitely set them apart in the fast food landscape.
So we've got Hardee's embracing their inner Norman Rockwell and Carl's Jr. channeling their inner Hollywood rebel. It's amazing they ever saw eye to eye on anything.
Right. But then, just when we thought we had them figured out, they threw us a curveball.
The Feed Your Happy campaign in 2020.
Exactly. Suddenly, here they are, these two seemingly opposite brands coming together under this unified message.
Like they called a truce in the Battle of the Burgers.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Does this signal a shift towards a more cohesive brand identity in the future? Or was it just a temporary alliance in the name of Happy Meals?
Only time will tell. But here's what I find most intriguing about all of this. It's proof that even under the umbrella of a corporate giant, distinct identities can not only survive, but thrive.
Absolutely, and it makes you think about that age-old question, are we shaped by our roots or are we free to forge our own paths?
In the case of Carl's Jr. and Hardee's, it seems like they found a way to do both. And maybe, just maybe, there's a lesson in there for all of us.
I think you might be onto something. Next time you're staring up at that red and yellow sign, take a moment to appreciate the complex history, the strategic branding, and the delicious contradictions that make Carl's Jr. and Hardee's such an intriguing case study in the ever-evolving world of fast food.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most satisfying meals and the most interesting stories are the ones that surprise us.
And on that note, I think I'm craving a charbroiled burger. Who's with me?